Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane Groeneveld, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. What if better teamwork started with better listening? On this episode of the Future of Teamwork, Dane sits down with Oscar Trimboli, best-selling author of How to Listen, Apple Award-winning podcast host of Deep Listening, and head of coaching faculty at the Marketing Academy. Oscar's on a mission to create 100 million deep listeners in the workplace. And in this conversation, he shares why listening is more than a soft skill. It's a leadership advantage. Together, Dane and Oscar explore, first, the story that launched Oscar's quest to decode deep listening. Second, how to build team rituals that honor the past before pushing toward change. Third, why great listeners don't just focus on the speaker, but on the whole system. And finally, how leaders can use process questions to run shorter, more meaningful meetings. Oscar challenges us to listen beyond words and shows how doing so can transform relationships, team performance, and trust. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane Groeneveld, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group, and today I'm joined by a fellow Australian, Oscar Trimboli. Oscar is the author of How to Listen. He's also head of coaching faculty at the Marketing Academy. So excited to dive into the conversation. Welcome, Oscar.
Thanks, Dane. Really looking forward to listening to your questions today.
Yeah, well, you did a great job of as you explained to me pre-show, of priming my listening before we even started the conversation with a cool post on LinkedIn. So I'll make sure that we tag that in the show notes. But tell us a little bit more about you. How did you come to be doing this really cool work in and around listening and all of the data that you've been capturing around behavior in this space?
I think to understand that, you need to zoom in to April 2008. I'm in a boardroom in Sydney, Australia. We're on a video conference to Seattle and Singapore, and we're setting the annual budget for Microsoft in Australia. And people are doing very unnatural things to spreadsheets. And a meeting's supposed to go for 90 minutes. And at the 20-minute mark, my vice president, who's sitting in the room, looks me straight in the eye and says, "Oscar, we need to speak immediately after this meeting." Ironically, I didn't listen to another thing for the rest of the meeting. I took out a pad and a piece of paper and started to figure out how many weeks of salary I've got left, who I need to call to find my next job, because it sounds like I'm just about to have the honey we need to talk conversation. I'm about to get fired. Well, the meeting finished a little early, and as everybody kind of packed up their equipment and started moving out of the room, I thought I might make the great escape and avoid the executioner's axe. And Tracy said, "Oscar, please close the door, because what I have to say to you is really important." And as I started walking back towards the boardroom table, she said to me, "You have no idea what you did at the 20-minute mark." And I thought, great, I'm getting fired and I don't even know why. I sat down, I looked her straight in the face, and she said, "If you could code how you listen, you could change the world." What I heard was, "Woohoo, I haven't been fired." And in that moment, there was the seeds of profound listening on Tracy's part, and the start of a quest, not to code how I listen, but how to code what do the best listeners around the world do. And we've coded that into databases and jigsaw puzzle games and practice cards and hundreds of interviews with dolphin trainers and air traffic controllers and blind people and deaf people and journalists and everything in between. So that's how it kicked off.
Oh, that's super cool story. I'm intrigued to know where this goes, but the one thing that first of all jumps to mind, Oscar, is that, you know, we're always taught about listening to engage with people, and people fall into some what I like to call hacks, like, hey, going back to your point, but they're just regurgitating a string of words, and they're really just trying to say what they want to say next and engage the person. So it can be used inappropriately or in a non-authentic way at times. I think we've taught some people the wrong listening behaviors. So I'm fascinated, what it was about your relationship with Tracy or your own skills and talents that kind of created that statement. If you could code how you listen, you could change the world. That's a pretty profound statement.
Well, I guess the reason, what the technique I used in the meeting was I invited everybody who was arguing for your number should be larger. No, our number should be smaller. You've been in those meetings, no doubt. And all I asked was, if you declare a number, could you just expand with the 3 assumptions that sit behind it? And quickly the meeting moved from a debate about numbers to a debate about assumptions to
Love it.
layering, and like an archaeologist going through sedimentary rock, you're sifting out what is noise and what is real. And quickly people sifted out that some of the assumptions that the head office was making about the Australian market and its economic shape were overlays from what they thought were peer markets, which, they would often compare Australia to Canada. Well, Canada shares a border with one of the largest economies in the globe. So, the GDP of Canada is much bigger than the GDP of Australia, and the composition of public sector to private sector investment is very different as well. But you can hear it's a richer conversation than, you're always trying to make your number lower. This is the number that's going to meet the growth for your peer markets, right? That was the debate going on. And I'd used that technique before, yet Tracy was listening beyond the words and noticed that. I'd used that technique in many meetings for many decades, in fact. And it was her profound listening in that moment, not just to hear it, to notice it, to acknowledge it. And I always say the difference between hearing and listening is action. So both her to take the action to point it out, yet in that story is something for team leaders you want to be thinking about. Despite Tracy's best intention, what she said and what I heard were completely different things. And that's not because Tracy communicated poorly. What we need to understand is people hear your message where they're at, not where you're at. And I think as team leaders, if you can deliberately and consistently check in on what they've heard rather than what you've said, the simultaneous equation that is communication, speaking, and listening will be productive and impactful rather than draining, distracting, and not necessarily having the impact we all want. I'm curious, Dane, what was going through your head while you were hearing all of that?
The fear piece was interesting because I've delivered some different messages to teams over my time. Hey guys, I'm really excited to tell you we've just acquired this business, or we've just acquired your business. That one, no matter how much of a good story you've prepared, the first thing people think is, oh my gosh, am I going to have a job tomorrow or next week, or what's going to be different? So that's what sparked for me the amount of times that I've hijacked my own conversation by leading with the wrong message. And then to your point on where we're at, that's interesting as well, because I've often found a challenge with upwards communication, but not a challenge with downwards communication, because I've generally been more afraid of communication from above. So I could sense that same kind of threat chemistry turning on.
Yeah, the listening and communication, definitely power differentials influence the context of everybody's listening. And I think one of the things that as leaders we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about, anticipating and communicating about future and change. And if we just realize that every time someone passes away, there's a ritual of a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And if we spent just 10% of our time in signaling to the future by acknowledging our past and helping people to mourn or grieve or celebrate what has brought us here. Hey, we're really excited to announce today that we've acquired this fantastic organization. And before we talk about the future, I just want to acknowledge the owners, the founders, the employees, the customers you've created, because it's all got us to a platform
Yes.
of today. And it's just that simple tweak to go, he sees me. He's acknowledging me. Because people need to feel seen, heard, and valued. And rarely does that happen when you're signaling a message of change that's exclusively about the future. You need to just take a little bit of time and anchor a message of acknowledgement about what has got us here. For good or bad, whatever's happened has built the platform, so this business has been acquired by somebody else. But if all we're talking about is future geographic expansion, new product opportunities, and ability to R&D, new products like we've never, it's like, yeah, that's great. But, I'm in finance. For sure, we're going to be made redundant.
Or you're going to make me change the tool that I use, and there's something that's going to be different.
Yeah. So I think for those of you listening who lead teams, and for those of you listening who coach teams, just tune in to the language of past, present, and future, because too many change initiatives over-index on present and future and not enough acknowledging the past, because it's how you treat the departed, whether that's in a ritualistic sense of death, or the departed people whose roles are no longer required by the department. How you treat the departed means how much discretionary effort I'm going to give, because I can see myself in them, because I've spent more time with them than I have with you. And until you earn the right, you better connect me with my past.
Yeah.
So that we can launch together in the future.
That's really interesting. And I've heard different advice, which isn't as complete as this, and it would explain why I didn't have as good an experience with it. So the other advice that I'd heard when you're communicating is like, name the burning platform. So it might be like, hey team, great news. We've made this acquisition because we've realized that in this market, margins are compressing. Big business does business with big business. So this is our way of surviving. And so while that's nice, naming the threat and giving everyone like a commonality there, you still haven't talked to how people are feeling, or, which people may not no longer be there. So it's still not, it's probably more present than future, but it's still not enough acknowledgement of the past from what I'm hearing there.
Yeah. And, we've done work with organizations that are complex federated systems, for example, where we've invited them, even before we commence the workshop, is to put in an envelope the thing they feel is most frustrating about the past. And depending on where the psychological safety is in the group, you can have somebody open the envelope and take the things out and record them, or not. Yep. Or just with the organization I'm thinking about, we went outside, we built a bonfire, and we threw these things that they wanted to leave behind into the fire. It was incredible cleansing process for everybody, because the leader of that group at that point said, and by burning these things, we've agreed that we are moving forward. Now, it's not to say they never happened, but this ritual of fire, and it could be done because it was an outdoor setting, but sometimes you have to, literally bury them or whatever's appropriate.
Shred.
Yeah, or shred. All of a sudden, there's a collective inhale and exhale from the group as they acknowledge, okay, so those things haven't helped us in the past. Equally, we have to acknowledge and bring forward the things from our past that will help create and sustain and accelerate our future. So that plays out two ways. Yeah, you can burn the unproductive processes, but equally, as leaders, the people in your system are looking at you to go, okay, what are they choosing to bring forward? And here's the tip: you're not. You've got to get them to choose.
They've got to pick it.
They've got to pick.
It's like the old stop, start, continue model. Like you got to put it out to them.
Yeah. So any ritual fires coming up in the near future now, Dane?
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. It's funny because once upon a time I had a colleague who was working for a company, and when they got acquired, the new CEO came in and said, we're going to go and grab all the old logos and we're going to burn them because we're moving on. So that was a little bit too aggressive. But I mean, had he taken the steps that you've laid out, maybe that could have been more of a celebratory moment, rather than just getting rid of and culling.
Yeah.
It could have been like, hey, this is what's no longer, but this is what we're excited about continuing, and this is what we're excited about starting. So like the human, I guess a lot of what I'm hearing here, Oscar, is like paying attention to the human emotion, like the feelings that are underlying, rather than just jumping in and fixing and talking about all the nice stuff can be time well spent, good investment of time from a leadership team.
Yeah, and we talk about 5 levels of listening. And when you go beyond listening for emotion, ultimately you're listening for what it means for them. What's the meaning they attach to it? And a lot of that's got to do with, lived experience, whether that's in relationship or conflict or whatever it is. As leaders of teams, if we can help create communities that make meaning, that sustains the organization and accelerates it, then we're going to get the kind of discretionary effort that people talk about as powerful cultures. Not cults, but cultures.
Yeah.
Cults are exclusive and cultures are inclusive, so we want to make sure we're building the right things. And for that, CEO came in and destroyed all the logos. There's probably doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just how you go about doing that. I remember working with a team and said, describe this team as an animal. There's 14 people on the leadership team, and we kind of went around the room and everybody said an eagle, an osprey, a cheetah, something that goes fast and kills things, basically. Except for the last person, who was Lynn, and Lynn was a card-carrying member of the introvert community, and Lynn was in finance. She led the finance function, and she said, I thought it was obvious. And she stopped. And there was this big pause in the room. I thought we were a snake.
Oof.
So what's sitting behind that oof, Dane? What are the adjectives you're associating with snake?
Slippery, stealthy, have a mean bite. So that's my view of snakes, having grown up in Australia.
She continued, Lynn, and said, I thought we were a snake. We've forgotten to shed our poor processes. We've forgotten to reinvent our systems every year. So you could hear she was talking from a very finance orientation. Wow. Now, the business was struggling with growth. The business was growing at 30% per annum, but its global competitors were growing at triple digits. So they had massive growth opportunity. And the conversation in the room changed immediately from groupthink, where everybody's listening for the similar, to listening for difference. Now, what you don't know about Lynn, in her culture, which is Chinese, the snake has a completely different meaning. They don't have a Judaic, Christian, Muslim view of the world where a snake was the first one to cause humans to lie to gods and have to work for the rest of their life and create guilt and shame. She didn't have any of that. Huh. Now, ironically, what happens next with this organization, they make beanie toys out of snakes and they code their product names as various versions of snakes, and they integrate snake metaphors into their sales presentation, and the business shape and speed does change. Yet, we could have ignored Lynn, the card-carrying member of the introvert community. We could have gone with the groupthink. And yet it's just taking a moment, not just to hear what's not said and why, leaders who just listen to the loudest or the active speaker are missing the point. They actually have to listen to the whole system, and when they do, they get this gold, right? And as a result, they unlocked a lot of potential, because systems that were connecting finance and engineering weren't fit for purpose for the kind of triple-digit growth they were trying to achieve. So I'm curious now you've kind of gone through the stake experience, Dane. What's happening for you as you think about that?
I love how by creating something beside the work that you've actually created sort of a focusing lens or a mantra or a call to action for the team, because there's something that's kind of safe, fun, and playful about it. So I love the way that Lynn kind of described it, and that it was directional. It wasn't just this is how it behaves. It's like this is how it thrives. So there's something very, very special about that whole, story and framework.
Yeah. And what I'm role modeling for those of you listening is to notice what Dane's actually hearing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And because we're in a simultaneous equation, communication is speaking and listening at the same time. It's not enough for me to tell a story. It's more important what makes sense in that story. And
it's fascinating.
How much of that do you do as a leader?
Yeah, not a lot.
No, I guess it's a question not just to you, Dane, but for those listening or coaching those who are leaders, is how much time are you spending calibrating? It's like, we know what's said, but what have they heard? Because your GPS could get very off track really, really quickly if the satellites aren't synchronized.
Yeah, or you're in that echo chamber.
So back to you, though, given that you offered it, what does it mean for you now as a leader?
Well, as a leader coming into today, I love that post that you said, why should a leader not listen to the speaker? And now you've explained that to me, that it's about understanding the whole system, looking at, maybe some of the unspoken elements or who's not speaking. So I think that's a really good prompt. And then you just demonstrated and modeled a really good example of listening and interrupting being compatible, because it creates a very interesting tension, and the tension itself can there's a word that comes to mind which I'm fascinated right now by, which is uncertainty. It creates a moment of uncertainty so that I'm not holding my opinion too firmly, and I can be like, ooh, if that's how I feel and I'm not sure, well, how does someone else feel, and what else might someone else be thinking about that they're not certain of sharing with the group? So it just turns it into like tangible action of sorts.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening, one of the things I invite you to really dial in and tune in on, when Dane is thinking and exploring something new, his voice is further back from the mic. He's leaning back, and you'll hear a different resonance and fullness in the vocal fold that he's expressing the idea from. And if your head is in a laptop or a tablet or a cell phone or checking your connected watch, you're not present enough to be able to notice it. And when you do notice it, you can start to do some pattern matching. And I can start to sense now, okay, the idea is landing because he's going back and thinking about it. And I can do that without watching, because if you're listening only, you might not have the opportunity to see the lean back, but you can hear the different resonance of sound as it hits the microphone through that as well. So when it comes to listening, there's many dimensions to it, but the first thing it requires is level one, is presence, listening to yourself before you even get to the conversation. If you have so many browser tabs open that you're not even present to the dialogue, and I know it's happening for you right now, you may be playing this podcast at 2 times speed. And that's okay, but what else? Have you shut down all the browser tabs so your memory is available for you as well as for the conversation? Or driving, yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So level one's presence, you said there's 5 levels. So
Yeah,
if
look,
there's a leader out there listening.
quick summary of the 5 levels of listening from the book, How to Listen. Level 1 is listening to yourself. Level 2 is listening to the content, what you hear, what you see, what you sense. Now, as we move from level 2 to level 3, we're moving to listening to things to listening for things. So at level 3, we're listening for context. At level 4, we're listening for unsaid. And at level 5, we're listening for meaning.
Very cool.
Now, a data set tells us that 2/3 of people are stuck at level 1. You're not even capable of listening to the other person because you've got distraction and the last meeting and what you've got to do tonight and what you didn't do this morning and the argument with your spouse or whatever else is going on in your head. Then we've got 30% of people who are stuck just listening to the content in an audio sense, what is heard. And then only 0.5% of people are at 5, about 1% of people are at level 4, and then the balance, about 10% of folks are at level 3. Context is how it's said. So how do we describe time? Do we describe futures or past? Do we describe problems or solutions? Do we describe positives or negatives? Do we describe groups or individuals? Do we describe internal issues or external issues? These are all how people describe things slightly differently.
That's fascinating. That's a very low throughput percentage at the levels 3, 4, and 5.
Well, when you look at adult learning theory and the distribution curve on that, it's kind of roughly aligned to that, and meaning most people lack the self-awareness to kind of understand that they're stuck in their own head. They're stuck at a level of adult development that it's, unfortunately it's all about me because that's all I've got the bandwidth to process. It doesn't make them right or wrong or correct or incorrect. It's just where they're at. And for many of us who lead teams, we need to be role modeling presence so that when somebody comes to our door or calls us or we bump into them in the hallway and they say, hey, boss, I need to talk to you about this. What are you signaling to say you're present? The most important signal you can give sometimes is, now's not a good time for this conversation. I can see it's really important to you. I want to give you my full and undivided attention. Can we pick this up in 30 minutes, 3 hours, tomorrow? They'll feel seen, heard, and valued when you say that, as opposed to trying to pretend you can process it when you know you've got a critical meeting that's less than 2 steps away from the next discussion. So sometimes the best thing you can do as a listener is not to have the conversation, to move it to a different space, a different time, and a different context.
I like that. I'm on stage next week with Meeta Malik, who just is about to release a book called The Devil Emails at Midnight. And it's talking about how bosses can whack employees with conversations, not always verbal, but at the absolute wrong time when, you cannot process the information and you immediately jump to context that isn't really there because it was an email. So there's something there between what you've just shared and one of the fables that she talks about in the book.
Yeah, a lot of people say to me, hey, Oscar, listening, can you do it synchronously and asynchronously? And the answer is absolutely yes. And the best signal of not listening to somebody is take a bunch of actions in a meeting and then not do anything with it and come back to the next meeting with an incomplete action. They won't think you've listened at all. Equally, working with people, as we did in the example we talked about earlier on, a Slack message, an email, a WhatsApp message in advance, what will make this a good conversation, Dane?
That's a great point. And again, I like the way you modeled that with the LinkedIn post. One of my former mentors shared this meeting format with me, and it was called PAD, which is a way that I remember it easily. And it was what's the purpose of the meeting in a sentence? what are the agenda items? Like, not a detailed agenda, like we're going to talk through X, Y, and Z. And then what's the deliverable that you're looking for from the meeting? And that little, it would take you 3 minutes to write, and you'd send it out with the invite. People came so much more prepared, ready, willing, able to do the listening, to ask the questions, to be curious, because it's a lot of energy that gets drained when you walk into a meeting room and you don't really know why you're there, or you're like, oh, here's another meeting where we're going to walk away with a ton of actions we don't execute.
Yeah, and I think whether you're using the PAD acronym or whatever's relevant to you, asking somebody either before the meeting or at the commencement of the meeting, what will make it a good conversation? Now, this is a process question. It's not a content question. So your PAD example, that's all content, right? It's the content of the meeting. This is a process question, and we don't do enough process in communication. We do what, and we don't spend enough time on the how. When you just invest, it's literally 2% on the how. What will make this a good conversation? Now, notice what I didn't say. What will make this a good conversation for you, Dane? I am not actually interested in what will make it a good conversation for you, Dane, because there are 3 entities present in any one-on-one. There's you, there's them, and the conversation. And not enough of us have our focus on the conversation. We're focused on our position or their position. Now, what this question does unlock, what will make this a good conversation, is it gives you permission to go, and what will make it a good conversation from my perspective, blah, 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 and you calibrate at the beginning of the meeting. Or you don't. This will still work. Now, what it does is it gives you a permission slip and a compass setting. It gives you permission to interrupt. So if you ever, this works in one-on-ones or groups. Somebody's just going on and on and on and on. They're doing an amazing version of repeating the same thing 5 different ways. It's like, wow, I didn't know they could innovate that well. It's like, and because they say, what will make it a good meeting? And they say, I want to resolve the blah, blah, blah. You simply say to them, hey, Dane, at the beginning of the meeting, you mentioned this would make it a good conversation. How are we tracking? Right? So that's just the how are we tracking? They will self-correct if they have any inkling of self-awareness. And if they don't, it's your job as a leader to focus on the conversation, not where their dialogue is at. Dane, it sounds like there's something unresolved in that story for you. I want to pick that up in a separate discussion. By the way, the reason people repeat stories over and over and over again, it's not because they like the sound of their own voice. They feel they've never been heard. That's why they repeat the story. And when they feel like they've been heard, they'll stop telling the story. So the question, what will make this a good conversation, or what will make this a good meeting, or whatever variant of that you want to use, gives you permission to interrupt. And it's also a compass setting, both in groups and individual. You get to the 15-minute mark and, Dane, how are we tracking? And Dane says, hey, Oscar, you know what? I realise we covered off everything we need. Let's wrap it up. Now, if we don't have that check meeting in and we've got 30 minutes in the calendar, guess what people try and do? Try and be polite and fill the time up. Who does? We don't want longer meetings. We want more effective meetings.
Yeah.
If you're in a 50-minute meeting rather than a 1-hour meeting, it's a slightly longer version. Check in about halfway into the meeting with that same thing. At the beginning of the meeting, we said this would make it a good conversation. With the balance of our time, is there anywhere else we should go?
Oh, I love that.
And often you will hear things like, we haven't even covered off, or, we discussed this, but we probably need to look at this in a geographic way, in a product way, in a customer way. It's just a different view. And then finally, towards the last 10 to 15% of the meeting, ask this question. Dane, if you were to summarize this for your manager in a sentence, how would you summarize our conversation? This is really potent for sellers as well. Hey, Dane, if you were to summarize this, how would you summarize this for finance?
Mm-hmm.
And then you've heard what they've heard, not what you've said. And if they say something that scares you and go, oh my goodness, that's not what I meant, you've got 10% of the meeting to save it. You're not at the elevator door about to close on the Zoom meeting. Ask it in the last 10 to 15%. These are all process questions. If you do that, you'll have fewer meetings, and the meetings you have will be much shorter as well. And you've got a permission slip to interrupt people.
Which is awesome. So you're getting time back. You're also getting more discretionary effort because people feel seen, valued, heard. And what I'm hearing there is you're also driving accountability because people are leaving meetings with more clarity on what was said and likely what was agreed to in the meeting.
And for you as the leader, you're calibrating your communication, going, that landed, that didn't land, that landed, that didn't land. So you'll pick it up and do more of what landed. And often it's something as simple as the shorter descriptors work better than the longer descriptors. Or my favorite story doesn't land, but the story about the snake lands every time, right? As an example. So for leaders, it's like, what percent? Don't do this. Oh, this drives me nuts. Dane, it would be great if you could provide me with some feedback about how this meeting went. Well, guess what? Dane's not going to do anything but be polite. As opposed to, hey, Dane, if you were to summarize this for Jane, who wasn't able to attend today, in a sentence, how would you summarize it for her? And they go, blah, and you go, great, could you also tell Jane that? Because that's another person who wasn't at the meeting. But you are getting feedback without asking for feedback if you do that.
That's cool. Stealthy. I feel like we're in a gym workout. It's like we're in the dojo and you're giving me like all these.
Well, that's what we call
them.
That's what we call our book club, the listening dojo.
Is it? That's so cool. I love it. I'm going to have to join the listening dojo. Super cool. So here's the potentially controversial question. I'm fascinated given that you come from the world of software and technology. Where does AI have a role to play in some of these process steps?
First off, let's stop being head faked by what AI is and what it isn't. It's just software code.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than that. And software is able to listen to business communication at the level of a teenager. So great. If you want to employ a teenager to do really important, complex work, no problem, but there will be consequences for that.
Yeah.
Yet this teenager, through lots of practice, will learn and eventually get there, but they're not there yet. So give AI the kinds of tasks that are low risk, high routine, and can be automated, meaning they'll have lots of learning reps in it. So when it comes to listening, we've had AI in listening since we've had automated transcripts, right? That's a version of AI on listening. Now, some transcripting software can get you 99.9% accuracy in US English. But the minute you invite somebody from a different culture and a different language set, that drops back really quickly to 90% accuracy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, Dane, but the workplaces I operate in, the likelihood that there's 100% of people speaking US English is low.
Yeah, agreed.
So the accuracy is going to be low there as well. I think it has a place. By the way, back to our story with Tracy. Tracy says, if you could code how you listen, you could change the world. In my head, I go, yippee, I haven't been fired. Here's what I actually said to Tracy. Tracy, do you mean code or code? She goes, Oscar, code. We work at Microsoft. She meant put it into software, right? I thought write a book or something else. So I've been pretty obsessed about automating the way we think about listening for the best part of a decade. For the best part of a decade, I know it hasn't been cost effective the technology hasn't been there. My vision is that you have a real-time AI coach providing you one tip before the meeting and one tip after the meeting, and no real-time coaching. There are sales automation software systems that the minute a competitor's name will get mentioned on a sales call, it will look up the context and give you a talking point. And the minute you listen to the AI coach, you're not listening to your customer. So
great point.
Be careful. And the answers they're going to provide are pretty generic as well. So Dane, the one thing you need to do in the next meeting you have, whether it's a group or one-on-one, ask the other participant what will make it a good meeting.
Very cool.
Dane, at the end of that meeting, write in a journal, what did you learn, what evolved, what changed? There's your AI coach, Dane. Doesn't need to be software.
I love it. I love it. My good friend Eric always tells me that technology is just a how. And so, you can solve the same thing with a paper journal, with an Excel spreadsheet, with a line of code in different ways. And I've always been intrigued by that answer. It's interesting. I had an experience the other day on AI, just to push it one more time. I was on a very textured conversation with a customer where we had a dispute. There was some very tense tone and inappropriate language and framing used in the conversation, and the customer sent me the transcript. By them.
Yeah.
And the customer sent me the transcript afterwards because I asked for it. I was like, I think this is inappropriate, the way you guys are framing this. I'd like to see the copy of the transcript, seeing I see you're recording it. They sent me the transcript, and it had a very matter-of-fact summary of like what was said, but all of the tone was scrubbed out. So it wasn't a fair representation of the conversation that happened. It actually looked very favorable to them. And so I responded back and said, can I see the unscrubbed transcript? And they're like, oh, there isn't one. This is what the AI did. So when you said the teenager, that's my experience of that particular AI tool. It was like, oh, well, this is really neat if all I wanted was 7 bullet points on the core content, but the context is entirely missing.
Beautiful, beautiful example. If you actually had the transcript, there's technology and libraries that allow you to measure tonality and measure sentiment and measure question complexity and measure actionability in the question. There's a whole rich set of linguistic tools that were developed way before AI by academics to do linguistic analysis. But if you're getting the AI summary of the conversation rather than the original transcript, the fidelity of the context is completely lost in that as well.
Interesting.
I wonder how that conversation would have been different if you started off with what would make this a good discussion.
Oh, I wish I could replay that. That would have been a great process question to kick off with.
If you speculate with me now, what do you think their response might have been that would be different?
Knowing them and trying not to put bias in place, I think if I'd asked what would make this a good conversation, they would have explained that they would want us to understand their grievances and come to the table with an open mind to explore a path forwards.
Did you spend enough time on the funeral, Dane, or were you trying to get into solution mode?
Straight into solution mode.
There you go.
No funeral time.
Full circle learning there. By the way,
Yeah.
If you were just listening, notice how Dane's big, deep breath in as he introspected and went to a deep place to try and think about how he would do that, because I suspect now he's got a really rudimentary entry point to continue that discussion to explore grievance.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So you can do the funeral not just with your employees, but with your customers.
Well, it sounds like that because it's grievance,
Yeah.
you're just like, oh, I can solve it. They don't want you to solve it. They want you to acknowledge that you made a mistake. They want you to acknowledge the pricing was wrong. They want whatever it is. They want to be
Even if it's not a
acknowledged.
truth, even if the pricing wasn't wrong and the features were what they said on the box, how do you tackle that one, Oscar?
I would ask the bigger question from that point. So you've mentioned pricing. And you mentioned the combination of the features. What was the impact on your business? We were slower or cash flow. Okay. So we're getting out of the... It's not about pricing. It's not about features. I suspect there was a higher context that may been relational, they were ignored for a period of time, or it may be something else altogether. But we want to layer up as quickly as possible to, if it was me, and it's like, okay, so we've got pricing and we've also got features. I want to address that. Is there anything else though? Right? So we want to also explore what's unsaid.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
the what else question.
Yeah, it is. And they go, oh no, it's just pricing and features. So what's the implication of that for your business? And then you can layer out or go right or east in that case on the compass is just go, look, I think we've done a good job of exploring pricing and feature set. I really want to exhaust, is there anything else in that time frame that we could do better, or put yourself there for them?
Yeah, that's brilliant. No, it's very helpful. I will put that into use when I revisit that and similar conversations. Final question, Oscar. This time's flown by. We need to do this again. I'm coming to the listening dojo. But when in your other prompt that we haven't touched on, it was just like, what happens to teamwork when everyone listens? Where does that take us if we're able to use some of these skills as leaders and as team members on a consistent basis across an organization?
Yeah, I think a good team and good team performance, everybody does their job and they kind of look left and right a little bit. Yeah, so that's good performance. But great performance is, I listen to my needs, I listen for the needs of others, and I listen to anticipate maybe what they haven't said. So there's two kinds of nodes in teams. There's the hub and spoke, which is the leader at the center and everyone around that. That's quite a fragile design. And because if you pull the leader out, all of a sudden there aren't connections in the node, or there's a network node where there's deep connections across all. So my invitation in that question wasn't when everybody listens. That's table stakes. It's when everybody listens to everybody. When everybody listens to everybody, product quality goes up, delivery timeframes are met, employees refer other employees to the organization, so it drives down your recruitment costs. Customers become your hidden sales force. You'll never know about this, by the way, but your referrals will go up because everyone can sell what you sell, but not everybody sells what you sell and listens to what that means for that organization. And it's that second bit. You can buy the software from anybody you want. You can buy this car. You can go to any other dentist. But you know what? Dane listens and does something about it. And that's why I recommend him.
Awesome. I'm so motivated. It's the end of my day. I only had 2.5 hours of sleep last night. And I'm feeling better now than I did when I woke up.
Yeah, a lot of people say to me, I'm good at listening, but how do I get others to listen to me? And I think that's a really good example. If you bring your complete presence to the conversation, even though we're doing this across the Pacific Ocean and thousands and thousands of kilometers away, you can change the state of the people you are working with because they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, and they'll be, in this case, more energized than when they started with a conversation.
Yeah, and my favorite word for 2025 is mattering. I think people feel like they matter when they're being listened to and seen, heard, and valued for not just for who they are, not just for what they do away from work, but actually for the significance and importance of what they're bringing to the team. I think that's a huge, huge fuel.
Now, a lot of people say, how to get in touch with Oscar, and, please don't. I would rather you got in touch with your own listening. And if you visit listeningquiz.com, you can take a 7-minute assessment, get a tailored report with 3 tailored actions just for your listening profile. And you can start on the journey to be a better listener in your workplace. So just go to listeningquiz.com.
Thanks, Oscar. That's a great call to action. And I actually feel like I've been on the other side of the microphone today. So thank you for modeling the behavior and for the inspiration. I really appreciate it, and look forward to diving into some of those tools.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Oscar.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.